Hey, good afternoon, guys. It's about 4:08 p.m. Pacific Time on this Monday, November 3rd, 2025. And it's sunny outside, but the sun's about to go down, and it's 76 degrees. But before we get into the topic at hand here, I'd like to ask you to do me a favor if you can, and that's like the video, ring the bell for notifications, subscribe to the channel, and share the video. Also, guys, you can go to the links in the description to find my content elsewhere outside of YouTube. If you are into podcast listening or watching, you can find me at all your favorite podcast affiliates, from iTunes to iHeart to Audible to Amazon to Spotify to Radio Public to Pandora and to an extent SiriusXM. Basically, wherever there's a podcast to be found, you'll find mine there as well. You can also check me out at other video outlets like Rumble and VENMO, which basically have identical content that you see here on the main YouTube channel, but have some content that's a little bit more different and very, I guess you could say, somewhat very not YouTube friendly. You can find those contents, if you will, over there, as well as you can also find me at Dailymotion and Odyssey, Dailymotion.com and Odyssey.com. If you're into art, you can find me at deviantart.com at BVW1979 and inkbunny.net at BWRosas. You can also find me at Patreon. I have a Patreon. If you want to check that out, I will let you know what the details I have planned to revitalize it a little bit. But the good news is the price tiers will not change. I am not going to up it or anything, despite what others are doing right now. I'm not going to do that. So basically, those will remain. But if you want to go there and support, I do have plans, like I said, for it in the future to revise and kind of utilize it to the best of its ability. Also, I have a Venmo and a Cash App. If you would like to help out there, that'd be greatly appreciated. And also, ladies and gentlemen, you can follow me at TikTok, at Twitter, aka X.com, and at Blue Sky. Also, ladies and gentlemen, I have two online stores. I have a Fourth Wall store. Click on the link at the top of the description to go see some stuff there. I have two graphic tees, two t-shirts that have some graphics on them. I think you'll like what you see on those graphics, especially if you're a fan of the Rescue Rangers. And then if you want to have a kind of a positive saying about you can't knock down which will fall, if you know what I mean. So if you want to check those out, those are there. I also have just a regular sweatshirt and trucker cap and mug that I have to re-edit and fix and put some logos on there down the line. But if you want to check out those merchandise, go to the Fourth Wall store. You'll find those there, and there will be more to come as well. Also, ladies and gentlemen, I have an OG Teespring store, which has been around for a couple of years now. The links are at the bottom to that. If you want to check that out, it'd be greatly appreciated. If you want to see what's there for you to get yourself, or maybe somebody for the holiday season, Christmas season, if you will. Also, during this video premiere, guys, the live chat will be open, and thus SuperChats will be open. So if you want to come in and just say hi in the live chat, give your thoughts on what I have to say here, that's up to you. And if you want to donate as well, that's up to you as well. Also, during the video premiere and afterwards, comments will be open. So if you want to comment down below instead of being in the live chat, that's up to you. And after the video premiere, Super Thanks will be open as well. And that's that little heart icon with the dollar sign in the middle, if you want to donate that way in case you don't make it in time for the live premiere of the video. Now, with that said, let's get into the topic at hand. Now, recently I've been talking a little bit more about, the whole Yu-Gi-Oh franchise, and mostly talking about, why, first of all, the whole love interest, romance situation, if you will. I've been talking about that. And then I also gave a response as to, basically, is it time for a female lead to take the lead in an upcoming Yu-Gi-Oh anime or manga? I gave my thoughts on those, though you can find those videos here on my channel. Now, with that said, though, there were several other Yu-Gi-Oh or anime manga dedicated channels here on the YT that were talking about, the differences between Yu-Gi-Oh as a manga and an anime. And mostly the big difference was how darker the manga, would be in contrast to the anime. Now, here's the thing that they don't mention, but I'm sure they're aware of. The anime, as originally seen in Japan, the anime is a lot darker. It's pretty much darker than I think you can expect. It has a lot of moments in there that, that are shocking. They're very shocking. There's no doubt about it. Unfortunately, when it came over here to the U.S., they had to censor a lot of that because they were promoting not just a card game for kids and, of course, adults to an extent, and teenagers in between, if you know what I mean, but they were also showcasing the Yu-Gi-Oh series originally as part of Kids WB and then for kids. And because of, and because I'm trying to find the right words to say, almost had a brain fart there. And because of the fact that, 4Kids themselves, when they were in business, were behind the dubbing, the dubbing and the editing for the English translation, of the Yu-Gi-Oh anime that focused on the card game and all that, a lot of things were heavily censored or removed. There were certain, scenes that, in the original broadcast in Japan and elsewhere were kept in, but here in the U.S. it's like, yeah, those scenes are a no-go. That's not going to happen. Although, if you go to Crunchyroll, if you have a Crunchyroll subscription and everything, you can watch the uncut version of the anime there in original Japanese language. Now, yes, as I've alluded to at one time, they did try to do the uncut stuff in English here in the U.S. back when the series first began. I know this because I used to own a couple of DVDs before I had to sell them back to have some extra cash to make some money. Or to make, pay bills and stuff, pay rent. So I had, those DVDs at one point, and, you definitely see the similarity to what you see in the U.S., but you also see the links you see the episode links difference and the script difference as well, the actual translation from the actual OG script. You see that. So there is a difference. Like I said, there is a difference between, the anime we saw that was brought over by 4Kids, first seen on Kids WB and then 4Kids. There's a difference between that and the OG anime in Japan. And you can also see these differences through the internet because even when I lived on my own in Lawrence, Kansas, I was able to find a website, online, and this is when the internet was really starting to thrive, really starting to pick up steam in the early to mid 2000s, getting to where it's at, basically getting to where it's at right now. But basically, I was able to look online, and I was able to find out that, there were several fan sites dedicated to doing a comparison, between the between the 4Kids version and the OG version. And you can definitely see that difference, not just in scene, not just in scenes, straight up, side by side, but additional scenes that, as I mentioned, were cut out, due to due to the fact that those were no-goes and everything. And you could definitely see that had they probably decided to promote the OG Yu-Gi-Oh anime, not the OG one known as Season 0, but the one we know of, if they had basically decided to promote that one, the card game one, as a teen-only, young adult teen-only anime that, basically would be on Saturday mornings, but would have like a warning right before it, or they would decide, let's put it on Adult Swim as part of Toonami, then to me, I think fans would have really embraced it even more so than they originally did. I mean, I'm not saying that the Yu-Gi-Oh phenomenon wasn't embraced, as as strongly as it was and still is to this day. But if they would have gone that direction to where they would have done the uncut, they would have put a parental guidance warning right before the the show started or the episode started, and left it as is, especially with an English dub, then again, I think the embracing of that show, as it already would become known for, would have been more so had they just left it as is, as first seen in Japan. Or if they would have said, hey, let's put it over to Toonami late at night, or let people know, hey, if you want to see the uncut version, the English dubbed uncut version, with nothing left out, a true translation of the original Japanese script, then tune into Toonami later on that night in Adult Swim, and you'll get what you want, or you'll get to see that. And to me, like I said, that would have really helped them out in the long run, no doubt, making the phenomenon known as Yu-Gi-Oh! Even more so. But again, I look at all these videos and I'm making these comparisons, and the question is, though, when you look at the difference in the animes, the OG anime in Japan and then the edited version, it's understandable why they would do it. But what's really shocking is the fact that, some of these animes, if you will, some of these animes differ, they differ in comparison to the manga counterparts. And when I'm talking manga counterparts, I'm talking basically you read the original manga and even the Duelist Kingdom manga and everything, and things are very different between what you read there and what you see in the anime. Because here's the thing, even with the OG Japanese anime, that would adapt the stories from the manga, the manga was a lot more violent. It was a lot more violent to the point that certain characters that would be brought back for reasons would not be brought back. They would be gone in history. Or they would be so mentally damaged and scarred, that the next time we'd see them or hear about them, they'd be somewhere in a mental institution or something. Basically, long story short, you might have gotten the same stories in the manga, but there were huge differences between it and even the OG Japanese anime. That's right. And some people have pointed that out. I mean, Yu-Gi-Oh! Everything here on YouTube, shout out to them, basically pointed out in the anime versus manga series, where they do a comparison difference between the manga version and the anime adaptation. Even they say there are, certain, situations and sequences that don't happen exactly as they do, in the manga compared to the anime. For example, he used the whole duel in the Battle City Duelist arc between Yami Merrick and Mai, and he basically said one of the biggest differences, between the two, is in the anime, both Japanese and English, Merrick, Yami Merrick doesn't start. Did I say another name? I do apologize. But Yami Merrick doesn't start the shadow game portion of it until about the 6th turn, or until after the 6th turn between both him and Mai. But in the manga version, it started right away. And the other biggest difference between them, the other biggest difference as well, is that Mai goes through what Joey goes through later on in his duel against Yami Merrick. Basically you get this life thread connected, she basically gets this life thread connected to her in the manga, to where whatever happens to her monsters, when they're destroyed, she feels the pain. And the biggest difference though, when it comes to Mai in her duel with Yami Merrick in the manga, in the anime, is not only does the shadow game portion start right away in the manga, instead of just waiting until the 6th turn like in the anime, but the other thing is, the big difference is that not only does, because the one similarity is, she will feel pain. She will feel that pain through that tether, if you will, that little tether connected between her and her monsters and Merrick and his monsters. She'll feel the pain and everything, but it'll also cause illusions, because that's what the shadow game does. It causes illusions, and basically the big difference in the manga, in the manga, and the big difference in the manga. I'm trying to make sure I say the right things here, but the big difference in the manga is that basically, when her monster gets damaged and everything, it hurts her, yes, but illusionally, she'll see something happen to her. Like when one of her monsters gets damaged, she'll feel that pain, but then she'll see like blood coming out of her body, like she's been stabbed, right in the, right in the back of right in her back or right in the front of her chest. She'll have blood spilling out. Well, Merrick, if he feels pain, he'll lose his head, like it's been decapitated and everything. Which, when Mai sees this, because she's the first one to, cause any damage between the two in the duel, it shocks her. But again, she is told by Yami Merrick that don't worry, what you're seeing is an illusion, but the pain is real. So there are slight differences. And yes, in the anime, she does get to a point in the shadow portion of the duel to where the more she loses, basically, via monster and points, she'll start losing memories. Now, yeah, she regains the memories later on, afterwards, after she comes out of the coma, after playing a little trick with Serenity on Joey to get him to basically, in a way, admit that he does care about her, and yes, she was in that vision he had when he was in a coma. But point I'm getting at, and everything is, basically, she starts losing memories of, friends and allies and all this. That's, again, she does regain, but it's slightly different, in the manga, because she doesn't only, I think, not only does she start losing those memories and does kind of regain them, I think she fully regains them in the manga as well, but she's also suffering pain. It's causing psychological damage to her. And again, that's just, an example of the difference between the manga and the anime, especially the, Japanese anime, because even the Japanese anime didn't go, to that extent. They had the limits because, they knew their original presentation of the Yu-Gi-Oh anime, in their country, in other parts of the world, was meant for kids. Well, not meant for kids, but was meant for young teens, young adults. Well, the U.S. version was meant for kids. They were meant for kids, except when you go to the movie Pyramid of Light, and that kind of shows you exactly what the anime manga was originally meant to be aimed at, and that is, of course, young kids, because you did see some things in the movie that you wouldn't see, in the regular censored anime version for kids, even if it's through like silhouettes and stuff. But and I think the same goes with Dark Side of Dimensions. I haven't seen that yet. If you want to have it, I just haven't had a chance to sit down and watch it. But yeah, basically Dark Side of Dimensions I think is the same way. But point I'm getting at, basically was with those exceptions, everything else was more like toned down, censored down, and again, the biggest and again, that's a huge difference, between, different countries and all that and how things are presented. But again, when you look at the fact that the OG anime in Japan, or when it was seen in Japan, differs vastly from the manga, even the English translated manga, when you see how vastly different it is, it's shocking. It's shocking to see that, even Japan, when they created the anime, they were adapting these stories from the manga. It's kind of shocking of how different they were, very diversely. You could see again with the Yami Merrick deal. You could see that big difference. You could see that, oh my gosh, this manga version is a lot more violent than the anime adaptation. You know, and it's not the only duel in the manga. In the manga that's different. It's not just the only storylines that differ between manga and anime, because yeah, the anime, like especially you get into Waking the Dragons, and then you get into the final season. yeah, those get dark. Don't get me wrong, and you can definitely see the difference between the OG Japan anime and the 4Kids English anime, the 4Kids English US anime. You know, you could see the big difference, like scenes being removed, script, certain words and scripts and situations being changed, and all that. You could see that. You could see all that, and so on. But when it comes to the manga, you might get some similarities, but you also get some big differences that you won't, that you wouldn't expect. You wouldn't expect to see, whatsoever. You know, you wouldn't expect to see, whatsoever and stuff. I mean, for example, you know, one of the big differences one of these channels talked about was like with Bandit Keith. Bandit Keith, in the original Duelist Kingdom version of the manga, he didn't get, basically dropped through a trap floor and into the river, or as the OG Japanese anime would put it, pretty much killed off. But he was brought back anyway. How he survived, that's another story. But the point I'm getting at, if you will, is that essentially in the manga he was killed off. He wasn't brought back for Battle City in the manga version. In the anime, he was. Whether or not he was supposed to be killed off in the OG Japanese anime or not, he was brought back for Battle City. Even in a cameo appearance or something like that. As a possessed, controlled duelist. But the thing is, that I'm getting at, essentially what I'm getting at, is that in the manga he was killed off. Pegasus used his power to kill him off. But then, speaking of Pegasus, Pegasus gets killed off in the manga as well in Duelist Kingdom by Yami Bakura. That's basically setting the stage of what we would find out in the final season about the character. It's just it's just when you compare the two. When you compare the two, you can kind of understand, even from a Japanese perspective, why they didn't go to these links. Why they didn't go and decide, okay, we're going to kill off said character. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Yeah, they had. I mean, for example, in the OG anime conclusion, or at least in the final arc of the OG anime Japanese version of Duelist Kingdom, yeah, Pegasus got the Millennium Eye taken out of him, forcibly by Yami Bakura, and he was left bleeding. He didn't die, but he had to be, taken to, had to be taken to get help, get some medical, assistance and everything. That's what he needed. That's what he needed. But the thing is, that's as far as the Japanese adaptation of the manga would go, because in the manga, like I said, he gets killed off, and it's like, again, you could tell the people, even on the Japanese side of things, knew that, hey, we can't take that too far with the anime adaptation. We'll let the manga have it, but we won't do it with the anime adaptation, because we want to be, we want to be slightly identical, but we also want to be our own thing. And I think that's why certain characters that originally died in the manga were kept alive for the anime and all that, even from the Japanese OG perspective. But yeah, when you compare the difference between the manga of Yu-Gi-Oh, and no matter what incarnation of Yu-Gi-Oh and you would read via manga, when you compare the differences between them and then what you see in the anime, even the OG Japanese anime, it is like night and day. It is like you're looking at this and you're like, wow. So in the anime they kept this character going, but in the manga they said adios to him. That that's like a shocker. That's like a shocker to a lot of folks. But that's the one thing that always different about about manga books, comic books, and all that. If they have stories that will later get adapted into an animated episode for an animated series, or even a live action one, but mostly animated, the big change you're always going to notice is sometimes they're not going to take it as far as what the manga or the original comic book version would take it. Instead, they'll just be like, okay, we'll go so far, but then we'll change it up to kind of make it our own. And if you look at a lot of shows throughout history, that's exactly what's happened. That is exactly what has been done, if you will. But yeah, when it comes to the Yu-Gi-Oh anime and manga, it's like night and day, especially when you look at the fact that even in Japan, although they let a lot of things, even though they allowed a lot of things to get away, gotten away with, if you will. That's what I was trying to say. When you look at the Japan version, even the Japan anime version, even though they allowed a lot of things that they were able to get away with, even they had their limits. Even they had their, the borders, if you will. They had the limits, the borders. Like, yeah, we'll go as far as we can, but we're not going to go that far. So basically, at the end of the day, it shows you that, even the OG uncut anime, Yu-Gi-Oh anime from Japan has its limitations. It has its guidelines, if you will, compared to the manga. But but the thing is, but the thing is, and the question is, I should say, what would you prefer more? Do you want to have do you prefer the anime, over the manga, or do you prefer the manga over the anime? Like, which would you go with? Like, which would you be more comfortable with, knowing that, yeah, the story's still going to progress as you know it will based on what you've seen, but would you rather have the outcomes that you see in the anime, OG and English dubbed, or would you have the outcomes that you see in the manga, knowing that, okay, that character's out of the way, but the story's still going to continue as somewhat we already know, maybe with some slight differences? That's the question. And me, I'm cool with either way. I'm cool with either version, because that's what makes fan bases like this and franchises like this so, franchises like this so, so popular, is you always will have a different version to lean on, to tell the exact same story, but you also know you're going to get some kind of different, iteration of that story, with different, takes, different scenes, different situations. And the fun of it is not only do you, like I say, get that similar story, but you get to see how, they go in different directions with it, which I think is really cool. I think it's really cool. But anyway, though, that's all I'm going to say on this, guys. But yeah, it's hard to believe that even the OG uncut anime version of Yu-Gi-Oh, even even up to the more recent one, basically pales in comparison to even the manga. That basically even the OG uncut Japanese anime versions of Yu-Gi-Oh have their limits, have their guidelines, compared to the manga. But let me know what your thoughts are. Comment down below, like the video, ring the bell for notifications, subscribe to the channel, and click on the links in the description to find my content elsewhere and to support me elsewhere outside of YouTube. But guys, give me your thoughts. Love to hear your thoughts on all I had to say here. And until next time, I'll talk to y'all later.